paid for being at church too.
Did you preach?
I was. I did. And it was, shall we say, unique because we started at 9 o'clock. Oh, and just for your information, I didn't add him to your prayer list, but I will mention that Joe Abel has been in the hospital. He's had some complications. He first started out with congestive heart failure, and which he's had before. And then somebody came to see him, and that person had COVID. And so he was restricted. He didn't, as far as I know, he didn't have any trouble, but they were restricting visitors and you couldn't go in to see him all week long. I know he didn't preach today, so I know he would appreciate you remembering him in prayer. Let's see. Don't. I'm tempted to ask. Did you buy that for him? No?
You get that on eBay. I thought he stole out your phone.
You know, this is one just like it.
He wanted your last something to be, memorable. Just say it.
Well, I was trying to be as colorful as I could after last 2 weeks. I wanted to end on a positive note, and hopefully we will get through with chapter 5 in the book of James. Some 20 verses there. So, and he runs over some themes that he has looked at before, talking about wealth and power and money and what we're after. Speaking of getting paid. So let's just jump into it. He starts out in verse 1 of chapter 5. Come now, you rich people. I'm not sure that you really want to start a sermon out with, come now, you rich people. Although, having been to other countries, we don't think of ourselves that way, but we are. We got more stuff than anybody. And still trying to find places to put all of our stuff. I'm still amazed at the storage buildings that are still going up. Come now, you rich people. I'm not sure what exactly he's trying to get at when he says, come now, you rich people, other than the fact that he is letting everybody know as he winds up this letter that he's going to deal with this whole topic on a little bit different frame of mind about what is rich and what is not. What is rich and what is not? What do you consider rich?
Rich in faith. Wouldn't that be one?
No, that's not. No, he's not talking about rich in faith. He's talking about mainly possessions and money and clothes, as he talks about later on. Rich people is the Jewish people had two different concepts. By this time, it had evolved into something else. But generally speaking, the rich were thought to be blessed by God. And if you weren't rich, you weren't blessed by God. And they had turned about because of the Roman occupation. And now they didn't see rich people in the same light as what they originally did when Solomon was on the throne, say. He calls on the rich people to weep and wail over the miseries that are coming upon you. You want to look ahead into the crystal ball and see what's coming at you? He's predicting their downfall, basically. Why? Your wealth is ruined, and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your silver and gold are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You stored up treasure in the last days. Look, the pay that you withheld from the workers who reaped your fields cries out, and the outcry of the harvesters has reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived luxuriously on the land and have indulged yourselves. You have fattened your hearts for the day of slaughter. You condemned, you murdered. The righteous man, he does not resist you. Silver, gold is corroded. Last time I checked, silver and gold don't corrode. They tarnish. They don't corrode. Your wealth is ruined and your clothes are moth-eaten. Doesn't say a lot of good about the rich people, does he? Those who have possessions and those who have stuff. He said you've taken advantage of people, you've murdered, you've stolen from your workers. He even says the fields are crying out against you. You have lived luxuriously. Basically, he says, a different translation could be that your wealth is rotting. And your clothes are falling apart. They're ragged. And literally the silver and gold, he says, is rusting. And their rusting is a witness against you. Does it sound familiar? Is there any image that is conjured up in your mind of what Jesus had to say?
Just taking a thought of tomorrow. I mean, it's that passage that talks about the fact that my brain just went on. What you see, what you wear. Or lay not treasures up for yourself in heaven. I mean, on the earth where moth and all that stuff corrupt. But store for yourself treasures in heaven.
There are two passages that come to mind. One is in Matthew 6:19 through 21. Anybody want to turn to that and read that? I think it's a good idea for us to look at that. What does that say?
Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
What is your aim, I guess you could say. I think that's what James is trying to get to. And the other passage that comes to mind is in Luke 12:15 to 21, where Jesus encounters the rich young ruler. Isn't that right? Isn't that Luke 12? No? Luke 12:15? What is that?
16.
16. What is Luke 12:15?
Said unto them, take heed, beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance
Yeah,
of things which
okay.
possess.
Yeah, Luke's version of that.
16 is the ground of a certain rich man.
Yeah, and it's the same basic idea that James is getting to, that comes from his brother. So it's not an uncommon thing that he's talking about, to pay you hell from your work. Where, I guess the real question is, what is your focus?
Well, that's what, if your identity, he's talking to people who identify as rich. I mean, if that's your identity.
And there's a lot of people
There's
that
no sin
identify
in it.
that way
It's not a sin to be rich, it can be a blessing, but if that's who you are,
yeah,
because that's who you, I mean, if you.
that's your sole purpose in life.
I mean, if you identify as that.
Yeah.
Then, and that's what he's saying, you know, you're not, looking to the right, you know, you may I mean, you're not looking to the right place, you know, for your sustenance or for your, you know, it's better to look to God.
I think the focus to me would be on verse 5. You've lived luxuriously on the land and have indulged yourselves.
And you've taken to get what you have. That, you know, that's not good. You can be rich, but you should be generous too, instead of. You
I
know,
think it was Paul who said the love of money.
all kinds of people.
He didn't say money was the root of all evil. It's how you use it. I'm sorry? Yes. And how you use it, the stewardship, and I think that's really what James is trying to get at. How you gain your money and how you use that money. We call that
And what it means to you.
stewardship. We are merely stewards. We are not owners. And how you use what God has gifted you. And I think that's the real focus of what James is trying to get at. Go back to chapter 1. What did he say in chapter 1? Let's see, 9. The brother of humble circumstances should boast in his exaltation, but the one who is rich should boast in his humiliation. He comes back to this theme again about passing away. And as you get back to chapter 5, in verse 6, verse 5, you fattened your hearts for the day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the righteous man. And he doesn't resist. Get on down to verse 7. Therefore, brothers, be patient until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You must also be patient. Strengthen your hearts because the Lord's coming is near. Brothers, do not complain about one another so that you will not be judged. Look, the judge stands at the door. Brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the Lord's name as an example of suffering and patience. See, we count as blessed those who have endured. You have heard of Job's endurance and have seen the outcome from the Lord. The Lord is very compassionate and merciful. He's asking everybody to pay attention, but there was an anticipation, and the older you get, the more you look forward to it or anticipate its coming, the Lord coming back. I've been interesting over the 30, 40 years that I've been in ministry to watch how people, and I've noted the age of the people and who talks about the Lord's coming. And the older people get, the more they talk about it. as if it's coming around the corner. The younger you are, the more it's off out in the distant future. I mean, that's pretty normal because you've got more days behind you than you got ahead of you at this point, for most of us. But James is calling their attention to it, and that we need to, and I like the way it's translated there at the end when he talks about the Job and his endurance. In verse 10, he talks about the prophets who were examples of suffering, and the word there is translated patience, but it's the same word. I like to be consistent. It's endurance. It's the same word he talked about in chapter 1 when he talked about enduring whatever trials come your way. And that's really what he's talking about here again. He's gone back to this theme that if you're on the receiving end of the rich guys and all that they're dishing out, what should you do? Okay, y'all are the ones that have supper over here. I got plenty of time here.
If you're on the receiving end of it, he says, endure.
Literally, the word means to bear the weight. As if you've got a load on your back, like a mule. You put a load a donkey or a mule down so that he can carry that burden. And that's the idea that he's trying to get at, that you and I, if we're on the receiving end of that, we need to endure. We need to be patient. We need to look to God for the answers and wait, because he's the one who is coming and he's going to judge. And I think back to Matthew 7:1. Strengthen your hearts is the theme that he really wants you to get at. How do you strengthen your heart?
Remind yourself of the hope.
Hope. What hope?
In Jesus.
Hope is a very ephemeral thing. It's kind of out there. What is hope? Okay, y'all know this is not the first night I've done this, so y'all know that I'm asking questions. I'm wanting you to talk back to me.
You can find it without using the word. So,
The assurance that God's word is true and the hope of the salvation we have in him.
It's pretty good. I like that. You get encouragement from reading his word about what he is going to do, what he has done.
Trust would be another good one.
I'm sorry?
Trust would be another one.
That's another good one. Trust, and I think of, when you say trust, I think of reliance. We are relying on him rather than our own abilities. We're believing and understanding his word and what he said. But there's another aspect that I really wanted to get to in my sermon this morning and didn't. I ran out of time. So y'all are going to get it, okay? Strengthen your hearts, because the Lord's coming is near. I do think that we need anticipation of his coming as if it could be tomorrow or today. And I think we have lost a certain aspect of that in the church. We live and invest as though we're going to be here forever, and we never know what the day's going to bring. It can happen to anybody at any time. Most of you know my story. Nobody expected me to have a heart attack and live. But we've had other instances. I had a nephew that we buried not long ago would have seemed the picture of health. Pearl Hills pastor. Dwayne Jones. Need I go on? We need to strengthen our hearts in a way that we've not ever needed to before, in my estimation, because of what we've been through for the last 2 years. We pulled away from one another because we thought we would infect one another with COVID, and we have missed so much that mental health people are calling it a crisis because we haven't been together. We need a bonding that takes place. One of the places where we strengthen our hearts is from the presence of one another, gathering in places like this at certain times to worship. Knowing that other people are struggling is an encouragement. Knowing that somebody has lived through it and how they lived through it can help me in my struggle. And if we don't share those things, we don't strengthen one another. We're not able to endure. As we share our load together, then we can endure. We can persevere. We can get through the struggles that come.
That's one of the real riches of being a Christian and a follower of Christ, is he established the church for those that follow him and put their faith in him, because we gain so much from each other. You know, if it wasn't, the church is a big part of who we are as his followers. People say, oh, you can do this or you can have this. No, you have to assemble yourself. You have to gather together and draw from each other.
But we're not spreading that message.
Well, I'm not claiming to spread the message. I'm just saying that's what we gain from it, you know.
And my intention is to encourage you to share that message about how valuable this time is with each other.
That's right.
The strength that we can draw from one another, just seeing people and being around people is such an asset that the church has lost. And I didn't mean to get into this rant, but let me go ahead and peel that scab off and let's get at it. Social media. That term bothers me to no end. It's just one of my pet peeves. There's no such thing as social media on the internet. You can't be social with other people when you don't physically see them. I mean, that's a misnomer at best, and it's an oxymoron at worst. While there is some benefit, we can do some things, you can't have church by computer. You can teach the Bible, you can have messages on there, but you cannot have worship and you can't have a meeting of people on the internet. Now you're going to go away and say I said I'm against this and that, and I'm going to call you a liar because that's not the truth. There are advantages. I come from the media. Okay, that's where my education was at. I know there are benefits from it, but when we put all our eggs in one basket, it's not gonna, it can't do it. So we need each other. He says, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the Lord's name as an example of suffering. What happened to the prophets?
A lot of them were killed, or they were, during their lifetime, they were not treated well.
They died under the load of the Wheat Still and Spend Year.
Think about in his own lifetime. His brother. What happened to his brother? What happened to Stephen? In Jerusalem, I'm sure James was there and saw what was happening there.
You go back and look in the Old Testament and look at all the prophets, you find that they didn't have a good life. I'm just telling you, they had some hard times. And the Lord did that. We'll take Amos, for example. He did that So that he brought a lesson to the Israelites through Amos and his marriage to,
No, you're thinking of Hosea.
Hosea, I'm sorry. Married to Gomer or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean.
Amos is an interesting figure in and of himself. He was a bivocational pastor, bivocational prophet. He was a fig picker, and the Lord called him out and said, go preach this message. I think of Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. Especially the minor prophets, those that didn't have as long to write, they did quite a bit of suffering. And he ends that section by saying the Lord is compassionate and merciful. What is compassion?
Caring, would be synonymous with it.
Both of those are descriptive.
Sensitive to needs.
Hmm?
Being sensitive to a need and a circumstance. And acting off that.
I'm glad you added that last part, because it's more than just a feeling and being sensitive. It is that, but compassion goes a step further and actually takes that into account. It does something generally. The term, the Old Testament and New Testament terms are descriptive of the innards. And when you're moved, you hurt. And so it's moving you to do something about it. He says the Lord is compassionate. He is, I described it this morning as getting a hug from God, which I think is, he wants you to know that he wants to pull you close to his innards and keep you close. He is sensitive about where you are and what you're going through, and he wants to do something about it. So he pulls you close. How does he pull you close? Where are God's arms and legs? Somebody said it. The church. And he is merciful. You know, we've talked about what mercy is, which means that he's not giving us what we deserve. Now, verse 12. Now, above all, my brothers. Notice he comes back to this term, my brothers. And you could add, my sisters. He's talking to the church that has been scattered abroad. Remember chapter 1, verse 1. Do not swear either by heaven or earth or any other oath. Your yes must be yes and your no must be no, so that you won't fall under judgment. That seems weird. He's changed. It's almost as if he's scattergunning and trying to hit a lot of different topics. What's he talking about here? Does it mean that we shouldn't take an oath at all?
I don't think you should. That's probably not the answer you should.
So when you go to court, you don't swear.
What good does it do? If you got the integrity to tell the truth, you're gonna tell it anyway. If you don't, it doesn't matter if you hold your hand on the Bible or on the encyclopedia or whatever. That's kind of, he's saying, to do more is, we're gonna be accountable for, if you say yes, that it's all be the answer. You shouldn't have to sell somebody on the fact that you said yes, and that you're good for it, that you're honest, so. Less is more.
What's the purpose in signing a contract?
Over the
Do what?
Hold you accountable, he says.
Okay. But it's the same. If your word's not any good, your signature's not.
I'm really old fashioned. My dad was the kind of person, if he told you he was gonna do something, all you had to do was shake hands. That was it.
That's what I was thinking, that never had to have a contract, never.
And I can give you illustrations after illustrations about how he lived that way. And so that's the same way that I am. If I can't do something that I tell you I'm gonna do, I'm gonna call you ahead of time and let you know that there's just no way to be able to do that. But if I tell you I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna bust a gut doing it regardless. And that's really what he's trying to get at. It's not necessarily about whether you should swear an oath or not. And they had gotten into the same kind of lifestyle that we are these days. I swear I'm gonna do this. You know, I can really tell. I hate people that, one right after another, they tell me one, you can tell, you can read between the lines and you can tell that they're just lying. It's just, you need to let your yes be yes. I mean, just be a man of your word or a woman of your word and go on about it. There's no need to drag it out. No, I've said too much.
That's two preachers today said a lot. Brother Kenny did too this morning. He didn't hold back either.
I'm looking for a verse here. I had it and then it's in verse 6, the last part of verse 16. This whole section is about prayer and how you should deal with prayer and our focus about prayer. And the last part of 16 was my father-in-law. The urgent request of a righteous person is very powerful in its effect. Prayer of a righteous man availeth much, I think is the way King James puts it. He talks about Elijah. He talks about those who are sick among you. Call for the elders of the church. They should pray over him, anoint him with oil. What is the world is that?
Sounds like directions to me. I think we discount some of the things sometimes. Maybe we've modernized a little too much. I've done that before, that very thing.
Well, the letter is to teach Christians that are scattered, you know, and he's trying to, and like Bruce said, you know, this in here because there's something to it. We don't practice so much of this, you know, kind of thing. We don't have, but we should. Again, that's part of being the church. You know, I mean, some people, it's a smaller and smaller group of people that would want people to pray for them, really pray for them. I mean, a lot of people like to put their name on the prayer list, but, you know, I mean.
When was the last time, not just here, anywhere, the deacons got together, the leadership got together and went to somebody's house to pray for somebody? How much do we really believe in prayer? I guess is the heart of the matter. If we really believe, I guess I opened up so many cans of worms that I can't think straight sometimes.
You're gonna tie all this together, I reckon, right at the end, right?
Yeah.
We're running out of time.
No, we're not. We still got plenty of
I'm
time.
trying to keep these sections in my mind, and I know you're gonna bring them all together at the end. So go ahead. I'm actually.
What do we believe about prayer? I think so many times we think that prayer is, we got God on on a rope that we can just pull like a bellhop, and that's what prayer is. And I studied at the feet of some great men, and one of them was T.W. Hunt. And I still don't know half of what he knew about prayer. But I do know this. Prayer is more about God getting a hold of you than you getting a hold of God. Prayer is not so much about talking as it is listening. And I think James is trying to get us to understand that prayer is a vital part of our lives, and that it needs to be a vital part of the church for sick people, for people that have sinned in our midst. And I think he shows the effect of what somebody who really understands God's point in all of this, what they can do. It's not so much that they have that kind of power, it's so much that God has so much control over this person that they understand what God is doing and how he wants to go about doing it. And that's why he brings up Elijah. And when he prayed, and it didn't rain for 3 years. And he prayed again, and it opened up. It's so much more about what God was doing rather than what Elijah had to say to God. So the prayer of faith will save the sick person, and the Lord will restore him to health. If he's committed sins, there was always has been a tie to our understanding, faulty or not, that sins are tied to sickness and illness. You say it yourself. What did he do wrong that God did this? What did I do wrong that God gave me this? So there's always been that tie. And we in the church can help those who are part of the church and they grow in their understanding of what prayer is about and how we can be a part of that. In verse 16, I do want to hit on this before I close on verse 19 and 20. Therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. You have to be careful about who you confess your sins to. The rule of thumb has always been you confess your sin as public as the sin was. And if you want more information about that, I'll leave it at that, and you can ask me later on. Verses 19 and 20. My brothers, if any among you strays from the truth, what is the truth?
Truth of God's word, what they've believed, what they've been taught.
Christ himself, for me, would be.
That's what I think of. I think of what Jesus' answer was, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He was the truth. This is his brother. Any man strays from the way, that was the common term in the book of Acts, the way, the truth. It's Jesus. If any among you strays, literally it means to wander.
I wish we'd kept the term the way. You know, if you can really meditate on that, I mean, there's just a right way. It's like the truth. There's not my truth or yours. I mean, when you hit the truth, you hit the truth. And when you're in the way, I mean, that's the first known as the people of the way, I think, or the children of the way. And that, you think, I mean, that's just, it's the way. You know, we're all going somewhere.
How many of you have seen the movie Up?
Most people don't.
You need to see the movie Up. It's an animated movie. And it really is, the reason I bring that up, there's a dog in this movie. The dog has the attention span of a gnat. Every time he thinks you could say squirrel and the dog's stopping what he's doing, he's turning around. I have that dog at home. He goes from one thing to another. He has the attention span of a baby, I believe, sometimes. He goes from thing to thing. He's smelling all different kinds of things, but he's going from one thing to another. That's wandering. He never has a path. He just wanders around. Or brothers, if someone among you strays from the truth and someone turns him back, let him know that whoever turns a sinner from the error of his way will save him from death and cover a multitude of sins. See, that's why he's talking about us praying for those people and listening to confession and helping those and healing those people, because we are about restoration. He gave us the ministry of reconciliation. While we go to help people and we sometimes have to correct them, our intention is to bring them back into the house of God and restore them to fellowship with Christ. It's never to ostracize or put on public shame. And sometimes when people confess things, it reaches home before we do, because people like to talk. This gets back to this whole idea of fellowship and what we're supposed to be about as the people of God, encouraging and strengthening our hearts. That's why we pray for one another. That's why we seek to heal. That's why we seek the power of God in our lives, because we can touch other people. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. It's one of reclamation, restoration, realizing the power that God can unleash when his people get right with him. And if there was ever a time that God's people need to get right, it's now. There are so many opportunities that are opening up if we just will avail ourselves and seek his face. Not only will he heal our land, but he will heal our churches as well. And we will see unknown power when we do that. Any questions? This is the last time. Okay, Mark, it's your turn. Lead us in prayer.
I can do that. Father, we love you. Just thank you for this time to share Brother Frank. He opens your word. We have time to study in James, Father. Just pray that we take the truth out of James and apply it to our lives, Father, that we may live a life more pleasing to you. Again, thank you for these seniors, and I pray that they'll seek your guidance and direction in their lives. Just help us to be there for them when they need us. Just pray that you go with us now to have a time of fellowship. Just bless the food, and we just thank you for Jesus and what he did for us on the cross.